Alexander the Great. After Alexander, the son of Philip the Macedonian, came out of the land of Kittim and conquered Macedonia, and defeated Darius the king of the Persians and the Medes, and reigned in his place. He was already king of Greece. He then fought numerous wars, conquered fortresses, and slaughtered the kings of the earth. He went to the ends of the earth and took the spoils of many nations. So the earth rested from war before him, and he was exalted, his heart was likewise encouraged. He formed a mighty army and ruled countries, nations, and princes, and they all paid taxes to him. Then later, he fell sick, and he knew he was dying. So he brought in his trusted servants who had grown up with him from childhood, and parceled out his kingdom to them while he was still living. After Alexander reigned for 12 years, death claimed him. Then his servants began to rule, each in his appointed place. They all put on crowns after he died, and their sons for many years after them, and the evils they caused multiplied on the earth. Antiochus Epiphanes and the lawless Jews. A sinful root came forth from them, Antiochus Epiphanes, the son of Antiochus the king, who was a hostage in Rome. He began his reign in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. In those days lawless men came forth from the sons of Israel, and they persuaded many, saying, "Let us make a covenant with the Gentiles surrounding us, for ever since we were separated from them, many evils have found us." This proposal found favor in their eyes, and some of the people eagerly desired to enter into this agreement. So they went to the king, and he gave them authority to observe the ordinances of the Gentiles. Then they built a gymnasium in Jerusalem according to the customs of the Gentiles, and made themselves as the uncircumcision. So they fell away from the holy covenant, yoked themselves to the Gentiles, and sold themselves to do evil. Antiochus conquers Egypt. Thus the kingdom was prepared before Antiochus, and he determined he would reign over the land of Egypt, so as to rule over 2 kingdoms. Thus he entered Egypt with a strong multitude of chariots, elephants, cavalrymen, and a large army. He engaged Ptolemy king of Egypt in battle, and Ptolemy turned from him in shame and fled. Many were wounded and fell. So they captured mighty cities in Egypt, and Antiochus took spoils in the land of Egypt. Antiochus pillages the temple. After he conquered Egypt in the 143rd year, Antiochus turned and went up to Israel and Jerusalem with a large army. He entered the sanctuary in arrogance and took the golden altar, the lampstand, all the utensils, the table of presentation, the cups and bowls, the golden censers, the curtain, the crowns, and the golden ornaments on the face of the temple. He stripped everything, and took the silver and the gold and everything costly, and the hidden treasures he found. Taking all these things, he departed for his own land. He committed deeds of murder and spoke with great arrogance. There was great mourning everywhere in Israel. Rulers and elders groaned, virgins and young men grew weak, and the beauty of the women was altered. Every bridegroom took up a lament and sat mourning in his bridal chamber. The land was shaken for its inhabitants, and all the house of Jacob was clothed with shame. More destruction in Jerusalem. After 2 years, the king sent a revenue official to the cities of Judah, and he entered Jerusalem with a large army. Antiochus spoke peaceable words to them with deceit, and they believed him. Then he fell upon the city suddenly, struck it a great blow, and killed many people from Israel. He took spoils from the city, set it on fire, and tore down its houses and the city walls. They took captive the women and the children and took possession of the animals. Then they built the city of David with a great and strong wall and strong towers, and it became their citadel. They placed there a sinful nation of lawless men, and they became strong within it. And they laid up weapons and provisions, and gathered together the spoils they had taken from Jerusalem. Then they returned there and were like a great snare. It became an ambush against the sanctuary, an evil accuser against Israel continually. They shed innocent blood around the sanctuary and defiled the sanctuary. The inhabitants of Jerusalem fled because of them, and she became a dwelling place of strangers. She became a stranger to her offspring, and her children forsook her. Her sanctuary was laid waste like a desert, and her feasts were turned into mourning. her Sabbaths into a disgrace and her honor into contempt. Her dishonor prevailed against her glory, and her high position was turned into mourning. A decree of corruption then the king wrote to all his kingdom, that they all were to be as one people, and that each one was to forsake his customs. So all the nations accepted the word of the king. Many from Israel also thought it good to serve him, so they sacrificed to idols and profaned the Sabbath. Then the king sent books to Jerusalem and the cities of Judah by the hand of messengers, and told them to follow foreign customs in the land, to forbid whole burnt offerings and sacrifices and drink offerings in the sanctuary, to profane the Sabbaths and the feasts, and to defile the sanctuary and the holy ones. These books also told them to build altars, sacred precincts, and temples to idols, to sacrifice swine and common animals, to leave their sons uncircumcised, so they would corrupt their souls by every unclean and profane thing, and forget the law and alter all the ordinances. They also added that whoever did not obey the word of the king would die. According to all these words he wrote to everyone in his kingdom. He also placed inspectors over all the people and commanded the cities of Judah to sacrifice in each and every city. Thus many of the people, everyone who forsook the law, joined together and did evil things in the land. They forced Israel to hide in every place of refuge they had. Then on the 15th day of Kislev, in the 145th year, they set up the abomination of desolation on the altar of the whole burnt offerings and built altars in the surrounding cities of Judah. They also burned incense at the doors of houses and in the streets. And when they found books of the law, they tore them to pieces and burned them in the fire. Whenever a book of the covenant was found in someone's possession, or if anyone sympathized with the law, the judgment of the king was to kill him. They acted with their might against Israel, against those who were found month after month in the cities. Then on the 25th day of the month they sacrificed on the altar, which was on top of the altar of the whole burnt offerings. In keeping with the decree, they sentenced to death the women who had their children circumcised, and the families who had circumcised them, and hung the infants from their mothers' necks. Yet many in Israel grew strong, and determined in themselves not to eat unclean things. They chose rather to die than be defiled by foods or profane the holy covenant. So they died, and great wrath came upon Israel. Notes from the previous pages. 1:1 Alexander is Alexander the Great. 1:8-9 According to the historian Josephus, Alexander's generals divided his empire into several dynastic houses: Ptolemy in Egypt, Seleucus in Babylon, Lysimachus in Hellespont, Cassander in Macedonia, and Antigonus in Asia. 1:11-15 Those sons of Israel who wanted to introduce Greek culture into Jewish life were called Hellenists. They sought to overthrow the legitimate high priest Onias III and succeeded in having one of their own, Onias' brother Jason, appointed high priest by Antiochus IV, 2 Maccabees 4. Jason built a gymnasium where young Jews competed alongside the Greeks. Many Jewish men underwent painful operations to hide their circumcision. 1:16-19 Antiochus IV campaigned against Ptolemy IV, reigned 180 to 145 BC, in Egypt. From 170 to 168 BC. 1:20-24 Antiochus entered Jerusalem, pillaging the temple to pay his war debts. 1:29-35 Apollonius the Misarch, a commander of Mysian mercenaries, erected a citadel. v33, known as the Acra, lit. Acropolis, on the Temple Mount, just north of the temple itself, where he installed a Phrygian named Philip as governor, Josephus. 1:41-53 Antiochus the king abandoned his dream of rebuilding Alexander's kingdom for the more modest goal of consolidating his own empire. He decreed that the Jews were to abandon their religion, v42, because it was considered politically disruptive. Any Jew who refused to sacrifice to the Greek gods on behalf of the emperor, verses 44-49, was tortured and killed, v50. 154 Inside the temple, Antiochus erected the abomination of desolation, Dan 9:27. Either a statue of Zeus sculpted in the likeness of the emperor or some cultic stones. Until that time, the temple had been the focal point of the Jewish nation and faith. Jews made 3 pilgrimages there each year, at the feasts of Passover, Pentecost, and Tabernacles.